Well, I'm going to save a seat for you. Yeah, well, London is. He's coming. I don't know exactly. He's coming in. Yeah. We'll see how the temperature's
He's in education.
Sean is the he's always got my temperature. It's true. Brian talks to your counselor. He's a lot less. Yes.
I know the one that helps them out.
Yeah.
Well, I do. So if he gets in by Thursday, he's gone.
I used to see your configuration.
I know.
It seems so weird.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, these are the handouts. Anything against that? Okay, thank you.
Go back to every time, do less than see. And then I said, the first time I felt like a UPS guy, you know, to get back to those dollars. Couldn't they?
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to get started. I'm Kathy Desmond-Marr, and on behalf of our entire staff, I would like to thank everyone for coming out for our Coping with the Holidays program. Thank you for joining us tonight as we come together to share some ideas, strategies, and support for coping with the loss of a loved one during what can be a very difficult holiday season. Thank you to our panel that we have here tonight and for sharing your expertise. On our panel tonight, we have Pastor Paul Walters from Lutheran Church of the Master here in Troy. We have Father Tom Selinsky from St. Paul on the Lake in Grosse Pointe, and they will be discussing different rites and rituals and other ideas and coping mechanisms to use during the holidays. And this, I guess, before we begin, one quick reminder for everyone to turn off their cell phones. I'm so proud that our funeral home has been in business for over 100 years. And we're proud to be leaders with our grief and loss programs that have been going strong since the 80s. I want to introduce our leader, Linda Zavansky, and she is the Director of Bereavement Services here at A.J. Desmond and Sons. Linda completed her master's degree in clinical social work at Madonna University and has many years of experience. She carries on our commitment to offer comprehensive bereavement programs for our clients and the community. Linda's going to be our facilitator. So with that, I welcome Linda.
Thank you. I see a lot of familiar faces and some that I haven't met yet. And hopefully I will, that you'll come to some of our grief groups or make an individual appointment. We are available for all of that for you. And of course, there is no charge for that here at Desmond's. I am so happy to welcome our clergy expertise here tonight. And so we're going to start with a little bit of background for you. Our panelists were given the Alan Wolfelt book, Healing Your Holiday Grief, 100 Practical Ideas for Blending Mourning and Celebration During the Holiday Season. Not only that, as both of them are so versed in ritual and sacrament and rites, and these things are so important, especially when you're bereaved and you've had a loss. So starting, gonna jump right in. Reverends, did any of the suggestions that you read in Wolfelt's book seem that they might be particularly helpful or useful? And I'll go to Father Tom first.
Votive lights. And this was before the computer thing, and we would light it for a funeral and then put it around the baptismal fount, and they would accumulate all year, and then when the program came out with the pictures, I know a lot of you probably have that from here, and the pictures were put on that candle. That was a game changer. People, when you see someone's picture, in our tradition, November 2nd is the Feast of All Souls, the day that is most used to remember those who preceded us to the other side of life. And we would take those candles, bless them, invite the families, much like you're here tonight, and then give those. And I would hear from people later on. We had that candle with Dad's picture, on the table at Thanksgiving or at Christmas. And those kinds of rituals, I think, give a sense of grounding and stability in what's an unprecedented moment. And I found some of the suggestions around the holidays quite helpful for people in that regard.
Yes, Jerome.
The two things that struck me about what Wolfelt's book talked about, one was kind of leaning into things, not ignoring or avoiding, but leaning into creating picture dioramas or scrapbooks with memories and things like that, and leaning into the memories to a degree. The other thing that struck me was a sense of intentionality around things. There was one where one suggestion was choose something of joy to do each day. Choose something that brings you joy, whether that's a really good cup of coffee in the morning or something like that. But choose that thing that brings you joy. But doing these things with intentionality and thoughtfulness. Another one which you actually these days in a corporate way can only do in church is sing. One of his suggestions was to sing. Now we sing along with the radio and we sing along with that, but the only place that we kind of sing corporately together, not sing along with a performer, but sing corporately together is in church these days, it seems. That's where our common song is. And there's something about the ritual of song and the memory of song and what music does and the words that bring back that are important to us. And of course, certain songs can bring back different memories at different times, different seasons. There's also this idea of, creating your own ritual too. For 9 years now, AJ Desmond and Sons has been the presenting sponsor of a 5K race on Thanksgiving Day that my congregation hosts, the Mighty Gobbler. And the race has grown over the years. And this last year we had 1,300 runners, and we're going to give away $15,000+ to local charities on Sunday morning. And we're really excited about that. But this year, I realized that this race also, for many people, two groups in particular, became more than just this kind of race. I got an email about a week before from a woman named Dawn who told me she was part of a Weight Watchers group, and they had been walking in the race for years. And 2 weeks before, the guy whose name was Terry, he had been there, kind of the organizer of that group, bringing them to the race. He and his wife were killed in a car crash. And for her and her group, the race was an opportunity to gather and to honor his memory. And here I thought we were just putting on this 5K race, right? But for them, it was this opportunity. I got another email as well from another family who had, the email was from a guy in North Carolina. The family, they had some family in Southeast Michigan and some family from around the country, and they gathered and they came to the race intentionally because his wife Carrie had died in a cycling accident, and they wanted to honor her by running this race and honor her memory of these things that she cared about. And so they created their own tradition in the midst of all the other things that were going on, which I thought was amazing and beautiful. We also honor All Saints Sunday, All Saints Day, the 1st of November. We're off by a day, but we won't quibble, right? And then we mark that on the first Sunday after the 31st because we have Reformation Sunday. You don't do that, do you?
Probably not.
No.
No.
And we remember, especially those who've died in the last year, on that day, and give people an opportunity to remember folks in prayer and lift that up. I've also found that remembering people throughout the year is important in different ways to different people. And I watched the Race to the Flower chart, when the New Year's flower chart goes out, and you can sign up to buy flowers for upcoming Sundays. And there are people that race to get their particular Sunday that's closest to an important day. And there's competition and negotiation that goes on between people who have conflicting favorite, most important days, which is it's interesting. But the importance of that for some people, in some places, to have those flowers in the church in honor and in memory of their loved ones is meaningful and powerful.
And AJ Desmond is the sponsor of the race as well.
I led with that.
How does your faith's teachings help you support those you serve who are experiencing the death of a loved one or facing their own deaths? And what are some of the tools that you use?
Well, I think scripture is key, and one dimension that unfortunately has been underutilized in our tradition has been the Lamentations, the book, of Lamentations. It's the only book in the Bible named after an emotion. The Psalms are about 40% Lamentations, and it's what I like about it is that it's earthy, it's real. It doesn't ignore the elephant in the room. The book of Job, Job believes in God. He's just mad at him, Remember, I actually had the chance to meet Eli Wiesel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he was great. He actually said this to me. He said, Job wasn't a Jew. I said, what do you mean he wasn't a Jew? He said, well, if he was Jewish, he'd have got a second opinion. But there's a real earthiness there. And, it's okay to be angry. people will say this a lot to me in confession, Father, I got angry, okay, what'd you do? I got angry. Well, I've heard that part. So what happened when you got angry? Why? You just got angry. And I keep trying to find out what happened. Then I can see they're getting angry again. It's, anger is an emotion, hate is a condition. And if you don't deal with whatever the emotion is, it can morph into a destructive, condition. And I think what's so beneficial with books like Job, the Psalms, Lamentations, and even this year we're in the Gospel of Mark. We just started that. It's a real, when you read that gospel as a whole, it's a sobering, experience there. It's very somber in a lot of ways, but it's real, and it's okay. We don't have to ignore the elephant in the living room, and the tools, the rituals help with that. Whatever those rituals might consist of, the incense, recalling Psalm 141, my prayers rise like incense. I tell people, we're trying to deal with a divine reality. And so, because we're finite, we got to do whatever we can. And we engage all the senses: sight, smell, taste, and Eucharist, song. All of these things put together can help us in that journey. And I think, like the book was saying, it's important to find your niche, what it is that helps you, and to, use that to help you in your own grief journey and the process. Death is an event. Grief is a process. And if you try and, I think, minimize it, it's gonna come out sideways. And I can tell you that from my own experience. But the rituals are all meant there to help us through that and express that in ways that are beyond the words.
I think of Christmas, the big Christmas celebration and all, but the 3 days after Christmas on the church calendar are powerful. We have Saint Stephen, the first martyr. He's stoned and dies confessing his faith. He's a martyr of will and deed, and a reminder of the violence of the world and the ugliness of the world. Even more so, the next day is the day of the Holy Innocents. These are in Matthew's Gospel, we're told that Herod, in an effort to kill Jesus before he could be old enough to be a problem, he has all of the male children in Bethlehem, 3 years of age and younger, put to death. So we remember the Holy Innocents that day, and the violence and the ugliness that we can see on display in the world at our worst, but leaning into and acknowledging that ugly reality. And so they're martyrs of deed, but not will. They had no choice. Wasn't like they chose martyrdom. And then we remember John, St. John, who tradition tells us lived and died of natural causes. Unlike most of the early apostles, lived to die of natural causes. And we remember those three, and I think they speak to some of those realities of the human condition, and the realities of lives that are cut short, untimely and ugly ways, and also the blessing of a life that leads to many years, and still speaks to those times of losses. And so it's also about being present then in community, being present in prayer, being present to be in connection with others and not being isolated. And I think part of that community is part of the gift of the tradition. Even if it just means sitting with other people, just being physically in proximity. And I think we learned that, especially, I think we took that for granted until COVID. And then in the pandemic, I think we realized how much just being able to sit in this room together, like if we did this on Zoom tonight, it wouldn't be the same experience. Right? And there's something about even if you over on this side don't talk to anybody on this side of the room, just being in the space together makes a difference. And that just the community part that is so important.
So now we're going to jump into sacraments, rites, and rituals. So a definition of rite states that rites are made up of specific steps known as rituals that are meaningful to engage in and perform a specific process. Example, baptism. The rite or sacrament of baptism and the ritual of words spoken, actions taken, the order in which that happens, they hold meaning. They are a process that's used. Can you, Father Tom and Pastor Paul, can you elaborate about the importance of rites and rituals when you assist those who are experiencing illness or the death of themselves or a loved one?
The sacraments in our tradition are the most sacred prayer form, and we believe that it, renders the presence of God. And in those ritual actions is provided, I hope, a sense of peace and consolation, a way that expresses a means of touching that need, so that a ritual that they're hopefully familiar with is something that adds that stability, adds that predictability and comfort that comes in the midst of the loss and the chaos imposed by the emptiness. Here's a familiar sight, sound, smell, taste that when celebrated, especially in community, really, reminds that person that they're not going through this alone. That there's a community support, and I think the rituals are communal prayer as opposed to individual or devotional prayer. And in that communal action, there's a sense of union and communion with those who are experiencing, very much the same thing.
The rituals often Roman Catholics and Lutherans share many of these practices, and they connect you to something ancient too, to something that has been repeated time and again, and connect you universally as well. And in the Eucharist, we say, with the church on earth and the hosts of heaven. And so we connect in communion, in Holy Communion, we're connecting not just with the lateral people next to us, but with the heavenly people, the angels, and our beloved dead as well. And so those draw us together and give meaning to that moment. There's also a wonder and a beauty of repetition, so that if you know what's happening and you know the pattern, you know what to do, there's a gift to things that happen by rote, because they can draw us in and help us at times when we can't think straight, or when all these things are swirling. We can revert to some of these ancient traditional patterns that help ground us. There's a reason we memorize some of these prayers and things, so that when you can't think of anything else, that can come flowing back. It can be a foundational piece, something to stand on when all else is swirling around. The other thing about the way we tend to talk about the sacraments, about baptism and Holy Communion, is that these are actions that God is taking into our lives that are not dependent on us doing something. That this is about God's acting in our lives, and even if our lives in the moment are a hot mess, that action from God can still take place, and that can still claim us in the midst of what's happening for us. So it's not dependent on the person. It's dependent on the actions of God, and trust in that.
And we believe, that there's that communion that goes beyond life and death. And I've always told people, I said, one of the things you have to do in the grief journey is to shift the relationship from life to legacy. And I think that's where the rituals come in handy, because it gives you that connection to something so much larger than any of us or even all of us combined. And in that, again, that communion, that union, that unity is a sense of, comfort, because it provides a vision that extends beyond the immediate moment.
My next question was, the experience of the death of a loved one can be described as chaotic. What rites and rituals of your faith have you found to be the most useful when assisting the bereaved?
There's something, I think there's a gift to a funeral that happens in a reasonably short time after a death, and the number of decisions that have to be made in preparing for the funeral between the death and the funeral itself, because there's a crisis, and then there's things to do in response to the crisis, and it brings clarity. And the rite itself, whether that's a funeral home or a church or however that happens, that action of remembering and honoring and commending is important, I think, to kind of put these things in space. And I think it tends to be better when those things happen relatively soon after a death, rather than extending it, because then it almost feels like everything starts over. The longer it goes, and the more difficult the planning process becomes. But there is, I think, a gift to all the decisions that have to be made in a short amount of time, because it focuses and allows you to kind of catch your breath before that happens.
A lot of that depends, in my experience, on the kind of death, and then, like you said, the timing of when this happens. That was a huge challenge during the lockdown, because families who were large and, celebrated life together, the blue blood dinner thing, if you've watched that show, and, is have that, family gathering. That couldn't happen in a lot of cases, and that was really hard for families. That just kind of compounded things. So a lot of it comes down to the circumstances and where people are at, and it's responding to that. I more I read the Gospels, especially now that I'm getting older. All right, now that I got old. The more I'm convinced Jesus did some of his best work not by way of executing a day planner and an outline he had laid out, but by way of introduction, but by way of interruption. And somebody is, been suffering for 10, 12 years. Jesus sees him on a Sabbath and he cures him. Why couldn't you wait one more day? You need to save yourself a lot of trouble. Response to the moment. And I think to be aware of that and and to be open to what ritual practice, what means or method might help you through that. That really, it can really vary greatly. And so part of it is helping people to understand, well, these are the things we could do. And I always tell them, I think the funerals are for us. Our loved ones are at peace. And it's to help us reclaim our lives, but in a new way, in a way that reverences and remembers and honors their memory, that empowers us to live with a greater sensitivity now that we've gone this journey.
Do you think it's important to have a funeral? And do you think it gives peace to those you have served when they approach their deaths, having the experience of rites and rituals?
Oh, absolutely. I think the whole, like I said, if you don't deal with it, in the right time frame, it's going to come out, and it's going to come out sideways. I was raised in a day and age where, boys don't cry, and you don't show your emotion, and, when I see somebody, crying now, that's the time for that, and it's the time to deal with whatever it is the moment is placed upon you. I think that's so important. And the funeral is to help us, again, shift that relationship from life to legacy. And without that, there's just a sense of incompleteness. I hate the word closure. I don't like to use it. There is no such thing. And that's not the aim or the goal. I think it's a more of a adjustment, more of it's a new level of awareness, consciousness or cognizance to how this has deepened my worldview, my take on this gift of life, and the importance to reverence that transient moment.
When I've seen people that choose not to have funerals, it feels like part of what they're trying to do is pretend that death really didn't happen, and not deal fully with the reality of it. And if they can kind of do that, and I think that too, we have a tradition, we move an increasingly frequency see cremation following a death, which is fine. But then if we don't have a plan for what we do with the cremains, then that's another thing that just kind of can sit and hold and refuse to allow kind of acknowledging reality and moving forward at the same time. I think those kind of rituals and practices that help us tell those stories, and help us remember, and help us commend people. All those are actually, they're difficult and they're painful, but they're also helpful at the same time. And oftentimes, when I work with a family and plan funerals, and I get invited in, especially by AJ Desmond's, to work with families for who I have no idea who they're not members of my congregation, they're not people I know, not names I'm familiar with, and so I get to spend time with family, and I get to hear the stories, and I get to learn a little bit about the person that they loved and cared for, and I scribble down pages of notes for them. At the end of that process, they go into it dreading planning a funeral, and oftentimes they go out of it pleased that they had the experience, because they had the opportunity to tell those stories and to remember their loved one and to share those memories. And that's part of that whole process that's so important and meaningful. And so, yeah, I think we need these rights, and we need to acknowledge the truth of the reality. And if you don't, it goes sideways, and sideways things oftentimes are not helpful for us or for our lives. Now, that was a two-part question. The second part, what was the second part? What did you have in there, Linda? Oh, you turned your page. You don't even know the second part. Well, I'm off the hook then.
And do you think it gives peace to those in certain?
We hope
Sure hope so.
We hope so, but I mean, I can't promise anybody's feelings or response to anything, so. I would hope it does. The intention is it does. Whether, I invite, you never know how people are gonna respond. When I invite families to, one thing I offer is I say, the scripture readings are a nice way for people to participate. It's a nice way for family members or people who care to honor their loved one, and you don't have to think of anything, right? I'll give you the scripture, it'll be in 16-point type, and you can read it. So it's a safe way. And I was talking to a woman in my congregation. She says, that was so awful what you did at that last funeral. What was so awful? The way you made his sons read those scriptures, that was so awful. I thought, I didn't make anybody do anything. They volunteered to read the scriptures. That was their choice. So I give up on controlling whether or not people get peace from what we do, or I do that, or they interpret that. The sons in this case chose to read the scriptures and were honored to honor their father in that way. Clearly, this other parishioner interpreted that action in a very different way. And I don't think her children read scripture at her funeral. So
The idea, the funeral, I think, is, in our tradition as Christians, death precedes life. You can't have an Easter Sunday if you didn't have a Good Friday a couple of days before. And, I look at that as the beginning of that journey, that transition, and to reclaim life, and this is just a personal thing of mine. I really think you have to mourn death first, and however that manifests itself in your life. Because otherwise, and people will say this to me, well, I want this to be a celebration of life. I want this to be happy. That was your grandma, Don't you? I mean, you loved her. You should be missing her, Because if you don't mourn the death, I really think the celebration of life done prematurely or first is a really kind of form of denial. It's okay not to be okay. And your friends, your loved ones will understand that. And the funeral is just one element, I think, in that process, in that journey.
well, and on that note, I don't know. I'd like people to be sad if I'm not here. Like, I'd like to think that my life had meaning and my relationships had significance, so that if I were not part of them, people would be sad that I wouldn't be there.
You're lucky, because they're usually sad when I show up.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah.
There's that too. But I understand the idea of a celebration of life and having some joy in things, and I think it's good to laugh and to remember people. But I also think, like, if somebody's meaningful to you and they're not there anymore, shouldn't we be sad about that? Kids go off to college and you feel sad because they're gone. They're not in the house anymore in the same way, right? There's a change. There's a loss. There's something to grieve in that. As much as you celebrate your child moving on in life, and they're starting their path, and you're excited for them, and you want great things for them, and you don't want them in the house anymore, and you want them to move on and start their life again. But at the same time, there's some sorrow in that too. There's grief, and that's okay. That's a good thing.
In his book, Healing Your Holiday Grief, Dr. Wolfelt talks about rites and rituals. He states that they are a useful guide and give structure to those bereaved. Gradually, piece by piece, these steps and actions, mourning, which is different from grief, because that's the action part, help the bereaved re-engage in this life again. Not untouched or unchanged, but finding a path for themselves. Do you have anything to add or take away from this statement, dear pastors?
That's your closer?
That's my closing.
We have to
Yeah.
So rites and rituals guide and give structure. And isn't that, death is a time of, when a death occurs, you're out of control. So we want to reclaim control, and it's not going to happen quickly, and it's going to take a long time. So it's step by step and piece by piece to re-engage in life, although some life goes on and we have to engage in it whether we like it or not. And certainly changed, yeah. I'll go with that. You want to edit it, Tom?
I think, no, I think the rites and rituals, especially this time of year, are just everywhere. And you have to find the ones that, are meaningful and significant. But here's the thing, at least in my tradition, and I've seen this happen with people, you gotta practice them from here, not from here. Okay? I remember when I was in a different assignment, and a woman went to the local funeral home to pre-plan for her husband's funeral. He was dying, and the director asked if he had been anointed, and she said no. Would you like him to be? She made me cry, whatever. He called me and he said, "I got to tell you though, she's really mad at God for this whole thing." I said, "All right, I understand that, So I go to her house. I said, I'm here to anoint your husband and pray with him." And she said, "I'm mad at God." I said, I kind of understand that, I said, "But, don't deprive your husband of sacraments that might be of aid and assistance." And she said, "No, that's no problem." And she opened her refrigerator. She had a coffee can of Host in it. She'd go to church, and I said, it's about a presence, not prescription. It's not like you're taking a pill or something. When people practice a ritual ritualistically, it's almost, it's got to be from the heart. It's got to come from here. And it is about presence, not prescription. It's about relationships, not rules. And you got to find the rituals and the practices that, might be most meaningful and significant. Maybe, I'm thinking out loud here for a minute, but maybe, you sit down with the family and you, say your prayer before you share your meal. And Grandpa was known for some, famous one-liner or some, snarky remark, he would always hit the loved ones with. Well, make that part of the prayer. It's a way to, remember him and talk about him at that time, That's what I mean when I say I think you got to find the things that really resonate within your own story.
moving on, we're gonna go and talk about making your plan for your holidays and for your special days that'll come up throughout the year. The first thing that might be helpful to you, and which I think is helpful, is you have to kind of assess where you are in your grief journey. Are you just now within the first 3 months of your loss? Are you just trying to establish survival? And are you establishing some safety now? What you do will go according to that, and what you can cope with and what you cannot. Have you experienced other special days without them yet? How did you cope with that? What did you do? Are there others you can call if necessary to help you? And to cope, do you need to change some of your usual activities? You might. You might be the one in the family that makes 9,000 dozen cookies every year, and you may just not have your heart in it this year. So what can you do? Well, maybe you can stop making so many, or maybe you can farm them out. We had a series of deaths in our family one year, and my aunt was the craziest cookie maker I've ever met. And she said, okay, I don't feel like doing this year. And every one of us got a cookie that we had to make and bring. So that helped her and it helped us. So we all worked together to get that Christmas off the ground. So if you would like to take out your sheets that you found as you came in, we're going to go over my plan for the holidays and other special days. The purpose of this tool is to assist you in planning for holidays and days that hold special meanings, birthdays, anniversaries, the dates of their death. This tool helps you to prepare for the upcoming first you will experience. The purpose is to help you reduce anxiety that the anticipation can bring. It's also important to plan for the days leading up to and after those main dates.
Yeah, I know, but can I make a little comment on that?
Absolutely.
In Greek, there's two words for time, kairos and chronos. Chronos is like time you measure with clocks and calendars, watches. It's the ordinary, everyday stuff. Kairos is a special time. It's be like Christmas time, weddings, anniversaries, vacation time, my birthday. No, I'm just kidding. You know, I think the idea here is to inject Kairos into your Chronos so that you have those moments, those events, those anticipated experiences that will energize you for that date. So,
Absolutely. So, the plan you are going to piece together, however you can do it, is only going to be for this year, because next year you'll be in a different place for your grief journey. And you'll have different needs. By being intentional in creating a plan, you can maintain a small sense of possibly having a little bit of power back, a little bit of control back over the day or the event. Allow those who support you the most, your safe people. If you've been in any of my groups, we talk about who are your safe people, where's your safe spot. Engage them in this practice that you're doing for that special day. Don't assume that people are going to know that this is going to be a tough day for you. You have to tell them and plan accordingly. You may choose to be alone on this day, or you may choose to be with others, and there's no right or wrong choice or plan. Select what serves you best, what makes you feel the best. By making this plan, you'll allow yourself and others to know what to expect. If you will share this date with others, allow them to participate in the planning process with you. You can do it on the phone, you can do it by Zoom, you can sit them down in your living room or at the kitchen table and sit down and plan together. So, what are the usual things that you do on this date? Most everybody has traditions that they do on the special holidays. Write them down and have everybody who's with you write it down, because you might get a little bit of difference here in what's important. List them and have the others who are with you listen too. List any specific concerns you have about this day. Based on your concerns, what considerations and accommodations can you make? Have each person pick 2 or 3 of your usual traditions that they would like to see included this year. List your most important one first. In addition, list one activity that they cannot cope with doing this year. It's just too painful. Compromise will be important. We all have different needs. And you're going to find, as we've talked about so many times, no 2 people grieve alike. And you're all going to be different. So be open for compromise, because you're going to need that. During this event, remember to mention your loved one's name. That gives permission for those you were with to speak of them too. They will probably wait for you to take the lead on this. Don't want to have the elephant in the living room. We want to approach this. We want to not suppress these feelings. We want to get them out. And that's part of mourning, and we know how important that is. What can be added to this date to honor your loved one? A prayer, a toast, pictures, a visit to the cemetery, special memories shared. And then you need to think about how are you going to take care of yourself that day. We are not without many factors being human. We have physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual needs. And how are we going to meet these? How will I care for others with me this day? When and where will I communicate to my family and friends my needs to plan these dates? So you've got to let people know when you want to do this, preferably before they happen. So how can we meet to make these decisions? In person, conference call, Zoom. If this event is happening in your home, do you have a space to escape to if you need to? If it starts to get to be too much, can you escape up to your bedroom or out to the garage or someplace? Specify your location, write it down. If the event is elsewhere, is there a place you can retreat to if needed? Specify where. First Christmas after we lost my son, we went to my cousin's, my aunt also lived there, and I had to figure out where can I go if I start to lose it. And I found a few places. So think about that ahead of time. Make sure you've got that spot you can scoot to. Also, another thing that can help you is if you can drive yourself to the event in case you want to leave. You can't escape your own house. You got to find a place to hide there. But if you're going someplace else, then if you drive it, would that make it easier for you in case you need to leave? So preparation, as much as you can prepare, because who knows what's really going to happen, is a key element to survive during these difficult days. You may find you cope just fine. And I would suggest the plan just in case you don't. I hope that you'll find peace during these times. And the best thing about having other folks around you, your family, your friends, those that you love and love you, is that they can also be that leading post for you. They are the ones that can say things that you don't have to explain. They can hug you and you know that they know. So doing that gives you a little bit of the ability to eliminate some of that anxiety and to give you a little bit of peace. I would like to thank my coworkers that have helped so much with this event. Our gal that set it all up, who put all the comfy chairs in front to make you move to the front, and my my employer who made sure we've got cookies out here for you and water. This is our first event with our ability to do that since COVID. So yay, Kathy. So I also want to thank our panelists and thank you for coming and helping us learn how to cope and to have some new ideas, some other ways to think about what we're experiencing and what we're going through. And also, I would love to extend a special thank you to Kat that works out of the Woodward office, who made the lovely bookmarks so that you would all have a keepsake for tonight. So, on that note, I would like to reintroduce my employer, Kathy Desmond Barr. And I also want to point out too that one of the sheets that I handed out was some emergency numbers. There are some emergency numbers for you. If you are having a tough time, even the suicide hotlines will take calls that aren't not necessarily meaning that you have suicidal ideations, but you can still call and talk. And the really cool thing I learned this year is if you dial 988, or not even dial, if you text 988 or 741-741, you can talk to somebody on text. So if you can't verbalize, but you can write, that might be a better suggestion for you. But people are ready for you to call and to talk, and they will help you process if you need some support. So don't hesitate to use those. Even if you don't feel like you're to that kind of a level, but you're feeling crummy, go ahead and call. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Father Tom. Thank you, Pastor Paul. Really appreciate you coming out and giving us your guidance and wisdom. And I hope everyone was able to get just a few tips to help you get through the holidays and to make a plan and see what's going to work for you. And in listening to what Linda was saying, I think, my takeaway is it's different for everyone. You have to be prepared and you have to make that plan. Thank you all for coming out to our event. Really appreciate that. And there's more cookies, but enjoy your holidays and try something new and try some of these new tradition and suggestions from Linda. So thank you very much.
Yeah.